Well, we are back to look ahead to a busy weekend in the EFL Championship as a huge 3-game match week comes to an end for all 24 sides. We are going to preview and predict the score in all 12 matches taking place across Friday and Saturday. And of course, as always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same in the comments below. If you beat or match my overall score, you will get a shout out when we return next Wednesday to look ahead to the first weekend in November. But for now, before we go and look ahead to this weekend, let's have a look back at what happened in midweek, because quite simply, Tuesday was an absolute disaster for me. I picked up 1 point in the 8 games for the derby win, but thankfully, Wednesday to some extent came to my rescue. If I'd have just switched those other 2 results, it could have been a lot better. But a perfect score for Borough's 1-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday, and another point for Watford and Wrexham's home wins, respectively. And it seems I wasn't alone. A lot of people struggled with Tuesday, and a lot of people finished up on 6 points with me. Lots of the field level this week and only 2 people above 8 points. It was another one of those brutal midweeks in a championship. So level with me on 6. A quick shout out to regular players Sam, Swifty, Marco, Isaac, Poppy, William and Keno, all level on 6. One above us on 7, Steve, Ojo, Peter and Mitchell. And in the top 3, Teo on 8, a very solid effort this midweek. But 2 people just obliterated the field. In second, an unfortunate Etienne with 13 points overall, beaten by 1 by Sven, who got 14 points. An incredible effort given some of the scores we saw this midweek. So well done to you, Match Week 11 winner. But now we've got to look ahead to the weekend. Match Week 12 begins on Friday night, and it begins with Preston North End versus Sheffield United. 2 sides that have had very different weeks. Sheffield United recovering from that slow start and improving under Chris Wilder. We talked about the fact that some of the performances had been a bit better. Well, now the results are getting there as well. Backed up that win against Watford with a 3-1 win from behind at Blackburn. And I think that'll be a really positive sign, because the fact that they didn't go under after conceding, which they did a lot earlier in the season, will be a massive thing. It actually wasn't one of their better performances. They didn't create bundles. It was a fairly even game, to be honest, but they took their chances, and there were a lot of games where they've not done that this season. So I think good signs for them, a really good result and an important one to lift them out of the bottom 3. They come up against the Preston side, who after that positive start have had back-to-back defeats this week. We said away at West Brom, not a disaster. Home game's going to be frustrating. Against Birmingham, they were the better side. They had a lot of the ball. They had a lot more chances. But to be fair, the couple of times Birmingham were able to counter, they looked like scoring. It was a fairly ropey defensive display, which is unlike Preston in those couple of opportunities. But a good performance. And in the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't be too worried about this week. As a result of that, despite the fact the form book would suggest otherwise, I'm going to sit on the fence for the opening game here. What do you do when there's no draws in a whole match week? You predict plenty in the one after. I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline. It's got to be a weekend for them. I'm going for 1 goal apiece on Friday night. Let's move on to Saturday and the runaway unbeaten table toppers Coventry City, who host Watford. For Coventry, it is now 5 wins in a row. However, they did lose their run of 5 clean sheets away at Portsmouth. However, given how good they are at home, that's a really good effort, though will be a little bit frustrating to them to concede so late on when they're in such a good run. It was another good away display. Counter-attacking, they looked brilliant. They were ruthless. And yes, they arguably could have had another chance or 2, but they always look like scoring. And with Hadji Wright, with Ellis Sims, with Thomas Asante, there's so much firepower in that team, no matter which people are playing. And you've got 2 assists for Sims, 2 goals for Thomas Asante this week. And you've got people like Victor Torp contributing from midfield. Mason Clark's looking a threat. Sakamoto's a good player. There's quality everywhere. And they're starting to look a real attacking force. On the flip side, Watford got a good win, which we did predict in midweek. Again, coming from behind against West Brom, which will be great news for Javi Gracia in his first game back in charge at home. It's a bit of a weird game in that West Brom had more of the ball and had better chances, but Watford actually had more of the opportunities. They look very keen to get shots away to work the goalkeeper, and in the end they got their victory. And we've mentioned they've got moments of magic in that team, but we've also mentioned they are normally abysmal away from home. Not scored against Sheffield United and Millwall on the road, of course got that draw against Pompey, but all of their wins are coming at home at the minute. And away from home against the table toppers, you have to fear for them. You wonder if there's going to be a moment of magic, because Coventry will have the ascendancy in this game. Can they score a goal on the break? But I have to go for a home win. And look, the run's going to end eventually. But for now, you have to go with a Coventry win. So I'm going to go by 3-1 for Coventry on Saturday lunchtime. The second early kickoff sees, well, the surprise of midweek, doesn't it? But two teams that lost their midweek fixture. It is Ipswich Town versus West Bromwich Albion. Let's start with West Brom, who lost away at Watford. A couple of great chances to get more than one in that game, but unfortunately didn't take it. Though Isaac Price is looking a real superstar at the minute. But Watford did create a few too many and were able to get too many shots on goal. And that will be the concern for West Brom, who dominated the ball. It was a bit like the old school West Brom that we talked about in their first couple of years back in the Championship, where they had a lot of the ball, but weren't able to take chances to go and win a game. And they've lost that solidity that they used to have on the road at times. Unfortunately, their last two away performances will be of concern. Not as much of a concern, though, as the week Ipswich have had after losing away at Borough in a fairly tight game. At home to Charlton, what a bonkers match. They had over 30 shots. They had enough chances, and I know it looks like a really comfortable Charlton win. That first, 50, 55 minutes before Charlton scored, they could have been 3, 4, 5 up. They had so many glorious chances. They missed some brilliant ones. I think officially they had 5 clear-cut chances, but then they didn't take them. They didn't get themselves ahead. Then they gave away a goal, and what would be really worrying there, and I saw it a lot last year with my club Luton Town, which is a bit of a concern. Not that I think Ipswich are in that trouble yet, but once they conceded, they just fell apart, and then the second and third came very quickly, and that's something that Kieran McKenna's got to address, because Ipswich haven't looked convincing really at any stage this season, bar when they were playing against Ruben Sellers' Sheffield United, and they're still giving up far too much on their own goal, which is something that hadn't happened before. Given the firepower in the team, I'm really surprised by the way they're not taking chances a lot of this season. Despite that, though, West Brom have been poor on the road for the most part this year, and I'm going to go for Ipswich to nick a home win and bounce back, because prior to that, they'd won 3 home games in a row, scoring 10 goals. I'm going to go for them to edge this one by 2-1. The final early kickoff sees another side that are usually reliable at home. It is Portsmouth versus 6th place Stoke City. Both of them come into this off a defeat in midweek. For Pompey, a narrow defeat at home to the table toppers after a little bit of improvement in terms of form. If we're being honest though, Coventry were the better side and it was a late consolation goal. So while it's not a performance or a result to get too worried about, they never looked like winning the game. It was a fair result. For Stoke City, again, a little unbeaten run with draws, but that early start where they were looking so clinical is just drying up a little. Again, Millwall away is going to be one of the toughest games of the season, but didn't create an awful lot of chances. Millwall deserved to win the game, and while Stoke had more of the possession, it was a fairly predictable match in terms of the outcome and how it played out. So maybe after a lot of my praise for Mark Robins' tactical style earlier in the season, a little bit more of a worry from that one. But again, not a game that's going to define them. It's still been a good start. It's a really tough one to call this. The only thing I'm thinking is that Stoke do struggle for away results. Their last 4, they've scored 1 goal. They've picked up 2 points. They're normally fairly robust defensively, but Pompey at home, against the big boys in particular, are very strong. They've had their off moments this year, but they did really well against Borough. They weren't awful against Coventry. So I think I'm just going to edge them to win this in a low-scoring game. So for the final early kickoff, I'm not going for entertainment. I'm going for 1-0 to the home side and Portsmouth to push on towards the top half. As we move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs and 2 managers coming under increasing pressure, it is Blackburn Rovers versus Southampton. We've got to start with Southampton again, because we said it on Sunday, didn't we, in the last episode? How did they not win that game against Swansea? How did they not take their chances? And we're left with the same question going away to Bristol City. They had more of the chances. They had the best chances of the match without doubt. They had tons of the ball. And maybe there are some positives to come from last week. There's a few people starting to talk about Will Still, but I actually think going forward, the last 2 games have been their best performances, just without that final touch. Adam Armstrong seems to be the only one who can put the ball in the net, particularly now Ross Stewart's got injured again. However, defensively, and I've said this all season since that very first game against Wrexham, absolutely awful. They look so disjointed. They've got no real shape. They look like they're going to concede every time someone counters against them. And even against poorer opposition in the league, they've done it. Against Bristol City, who are one of the better teams at the moment going forward, they're always going to give up the chances. And unfortunately for them, it's a very difficult run with just 2 wins from 11 games so far. But I do feel the signs are there. If they can sort out the defensive side and take their chances, the rest of it between the 2 boxes is not bad. But it's exactly what I was saying about Luton last season, and it all went wrong. So it still worries for me about Southampton. Not as many worries as for Blackburn though, who are second bottom after 10 games, a 3-1 defeat at home to Sheffield United. Fairness, it's a tough week for them, having played Coventry and then a resurgent Sheffield United. But it was an even game. They didn't really take many chances, but they didn't create a huge amount. From 1-0 up though, the biggest concern again will be what happens when they concede. There are a few teams in this division at the moment, and Blackburn are certainly one of them, that when they concede, they do tend to go under, and it's a bit of a problem at the moment. Sheffield United were a team struggling with confidence, and it was a big game down the bottom there. Unfortunately, Blackburn have got themselves bang in trouble, and if I had to bank on it, I think between him and Liam Manning, they're probably battling it out for the next manager to lose their job, because he started poorly before picking up at the end of last year. It's just not got going this season. It's 4 defeats in 5. When you consider that Sheffield United are down there, Swansea and Charlton sides that were expected to finish bottom half, it does make for grim reading. And you just feel Southampton have got to win eventually. They're creating so much. I know this is a really stupid thing to do, but I'm going to go for Southampton to keep a clean sheet. And I don't know why, because it goes against everything I've said. They've got to take their chances eventually. And I'm going to go for the Saints to win by 2-0. As we move on to two sides that had a much better midweek, it is Bristol City versus Birmingham City. Of course, Bristol City beat Southampton in that game where, of course, they were perhaps fortunate not to concede more because Southampton did have the best chances of the match. But on the counter-attack, it was clinical, it was ruthless. And we're starting to see from Gerhard Struber that they can play in different ways. It was mentioned in the comments by a couple of the Bristol City fans. They're actually better in these home games at the moment where they can counter, where they can play on the break, which sort of what we saw under Liam Manning at times last year, rather than the games where they're expected to dominate, as we saw against Oxford a few weeks ago. Scott Twine's starting to look a real superstar, which we were just sort of waiting for him to ignite at Bristol City, and he seems to be starting to find some regular form now. Whereas for Birmingham, after 4 difficult matches, a priceless win away at Preston North End. A really good result, a perfect away performance. Yes, they gave up chances. On another day, Preston could have taken 1 or 2. They were throwing their bodies on the line. They got themselves ahead in the game, which is crucial. And they did create themselves on the break. Not bundles of chances, but they were looking a threat, which is something. And for all of the games where they've had loads of chances and not taken them, to come away from one where they've had less and nick a 1-0 away win, I think they'll be really pleased with. So a solid start, if not spectacular for Birmingham just yet. Still worried about that regular goal threat, but they're looking okay at the moment. They're doing all right. Not as well as Bristol City. I've got a funny feeling about this game. It's another one of those where Birmingham will probably let Bristol City have the ball. And we saw against Oxford, against QPR, they do struggle with those games a little bit. And then what do? Do they get hit on the break? Do they create chances? Or do they struggle to break a team down? I'm going to sit on the fence for this one. I'm not sure. I still feel Bristol City could win it. But I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. As we move to Pride Park for 2 more sides that had a very good midweek, it is Derby County versus QPR. Given the fact that both won by a 0-0, you might not be expecting too much entertainment this weekend. But Derby really needed to get that result. It wasn't the greatest performance in the world. They had very little of the ball. They hit on the counter against the Norwich side that looked okay despite being bereft of confidence. But let's be fair, Derby took a chance. They created a couple of good ones during the match. And then they defended well, which is what we were used to seeing from them at home last year. So much more of a Derby performance and gets them away from that relegation zone for now. Whereas for QPR, after a very slow start, we're starting to see what I said in pre-season. I was really positive about the appointment of Julian Stefan. I think he's a brilliant coach. And I know the Swansea game was skewed by the fact that after they went ahead, the home side went down to 10. And obviously it made it a bit more of an easier game to control, which they didn't do brilliantly, by the way. But they did have the better chances of the match. They did deserve to win it just about. And they're having a decent season now. After that 7-1 defeat against Coventry, I don't think many would have seen this coming. So good signs for both sides in recent games. Both becoming a lot more difficult to beat with just 1 defeat in their last 5 each. Derby don't score many. They get a lot of 1-1 draws. QPR have picked up some good away results recently. I think I'm going to do it for the 3rd time. The Championship's favourite scoreline. No draws in midweek. I'm going for 3-1-alls this weekend. 1-1 between Derby and QPR. Let's move on to 2 of the early surprise packages. The 2nd and 3rd favourites for relegation with a lot of bookmakers in pre-season. It is Hull City versus Charlton, who at the moment are in 7th and 5th respectively. It is paining me to watch most of Luton's defence of last year shine under our former manager Nathan Jones. Back-to-back wins at home to Sheffield Wednesday and away to Ipswich, which we mentioned a bit earlier on. Let's not beat around the bush on another day. Charlton could have been 3 or 4 down at half time. And early in the second half, they just clung in there. And that's important against these sides struggling with confidence. They then get a goal and Ipswich fall apart and they suddenly look like scoring plenty. But on another day, that could have been 3 or 4-1 to the home side. So you don't want to get too overexcited. But I watched a lot of those Nathan Jones away days when he was in charge of Luton. They sat back, they invited pressure, they gave up chances, but they always had a threat on the attack. And unfortunately for Ipswich, Charlton had that this week. Really good result for them. On the flip side, a brilliant win for Hull City, who make it 3 in a row at home to Leicester. 2 early goals gave them something to cling on to. And after that, it is largely what they did. Leicester huffed and puffed a lot. They gave up a lot of the ball, Hull City. They gave up a lot of shots on goal, but not too many brilliant opportunities. They sort of forced long-range efforts, set pieces, etc. They defended their box well. And to be fair, that was my big criticism of them earlier in the season. So I've got to give them praise when they get it right. Really good result, really good performance. I know I changed my prediction for them to go down after they made those signings just before the season, but I didn't expect them to be doing this well. So fair play to Hull City, fair play to Charlton. I said they'd be nowhere near it, and we've been proven right so far. I'm going to go for another draw in this one. Both sides have been scoring plenty recently too. So do you know what? I'll go for a bit of a thriller. My 4th draw of the weekend will be 2-2. Into the final third as we move to, well, top of the table v mid-table. It is Middlesbrough versus Wrexham. Both sides with a 1-0 win in midweek. Both sides with really impressive results. Wrexham beat Oxford by a 0-0, but made all the more important by clinging on with 10 men for the final 20 minutes, where it was such an important result to get. I know we've mentioned that Oxford are beyond cautious on the road at times, but Wrexham actually managed that game generally very well. Yes, take the red card aside, but they were the better team before the red card, and after it, they didn't really give up anything clear on their goal, which is a brilliant effort indeed. And we mentioned it earlier in the season, Wrexham had sort of gone back to that old school National League, we'll outscore you, we'll try and win 4-3, 3-2. And they've just found a little bit of solidity now. It's been a very decent spell for them, just 1 defeat in 6. And I know there's a lot of draws in there, and I know the Hollywood story, and a lot of people in the comments pre-season were laughing at us talking about the top 6. It's just important they have a solid year in a championship and don't start going back down, lose that momentum. And they're so far doing a really solid job. Bill Parkinson's come under a little bit of pressure, which I think is absolutely absurd. And it's a really good win for them. So tightened up defensively, just conceded 4 in the last 5. But another tight defence is Middlesbrough. In fact, the best in the division. Conceded just 7 goals in their 11 games. Backed up that narrow win against Ipswich with a 1-0 win away at Sheffield Wednesday. Scored early and you thought the floodgates might open. But they didn't due to poor finishing. And it's my big concern for Borough this season. Look, there's been a lot of games they've won that have been tight. And you've got to say fair play to them here. But this is a game when you look at the chances. I think, again, had 5 clear-cut chances. Should have been 3, 4, 5 goals up. And just weren't taking them. And there's so few goal scorers in the Championship these days. There's so few players that take their opportunities. Yes, Borough should have had an absolute stonewall penalty. On another day, that would have given them a chance at 2. But they still had enough to win 3 or 4-0 there. And the fact they weren't taking them, maybe of a concern when they come up against more stiff opposition. Does make this a hard game to call, though Wrexham have struggled a bit more on the road. Both teams' results would suggest this is going to be tight. I'm going to go for Borough by the odd goal, just to nick it at home by 2-1. 3 to go, and we move on to an absolutely flying side in 3rd place. 3 wins in a row for Millwall, who host Leicester City. Leicester have had a tough time, just 1 win in 6, a lot of draws, and the unbeaten run ended against Hull City. A disappointing day for them. Give up a 2-goal lead in the first half an hour, it's always going to be difficult. While they huffed and puffed and did get a goal back, they dominated the ball. They didn't create that many great opportunities. It was half chances, it was set pieces, and they didn't really take advantage of those either. So while Hull defended their box well, don't give an opportunity to a team to. Leicester are falling behind too often in games at the moment. And to be fair, they're not really holding on to leads that well. They've still not got that striker who's a goal scorer. That's something that is a concern. The goals are being spread around, but they've not got that Jamie Vardy. They've not got that what Iheanacho could have been. They've not got those players. It's making it very difficult for them. For Millwall, 3 wins in succession, 2 of them at home where they're finally finding form. They beat Stoke pretty comfortably in the end. It was a fairly comprehensive classic Millwall 2-0. It's what we used to predict years ago every week under Gary Rowett. Gave up the ball, had more of the chances, threat from set pieces, threat from wide areas, and a comfortable win. you've got to say they look a really good side. And I'm so glad now I predicted them to sneak in the top six this year because they're starting to look a real handful. For this game, there's part of me that thinks Leicester do something because they have got players that can be imposing from set pieces themselves. They might be able to defend their box better from wide areas. Will suit defenders like Vestergaard, you would think. They've had a lot of 1-1 draws recently. They've had a lot of tight games. And while Millwall have won a couple of home ones comfortably, I just feel they might get pegged back here. I was going to go for 1-0 to Millwall. But you know what? For the fourth time, I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline. You just feel, after a lot of teams have won in midweek, they'll feel, do you know what? 4.7 points, not bad for in the week. Let's just take the draw and move on. I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline for the fourth and final time. As we move down to the other end of the table, for bottom place Sheffield Wednesday against 20th placed Oxford, we praised how well Oxford had done at home to Derby and how well they dominated the game, been assertive, created chances last weekend. Well, in midweek against Wrexham, they were just too cautious again. Even against 10 men the last 20 minutes, they just cannot open up on the road. I know they had that great win at Bristol City, who was so offensive against them, it gave them space, but they're really struggling against any decent defence or any solid defence to break them down away from home, and they're not really showing enough intention away from home to try and do so. For Sheffield Wednesday, 3 defeats in succession. The last 2 they fought hard, but look, Coventry, Charlton and Borough are 3 tough games in a row. They all are at this level, I guess, but Oxford may be the one they target as a winnable match. They're looking at home in a situation that's getting ever worse. Obviously, the winding up petition off the pitch taking shape, the ownership protest ramping up more and more. It's a horrible situation for the players, and in the circumstances, they've been more competitive than we expected. At home to an Oxford side who struggle away from home, who really struggle to score on the road as well. I just think this might be a tighter game and maybe a chance at a result. I'm not going to bank on them to get 3 points, but I'm going to go bold again. I did it once in midweek and looked stupid. I'm going to go for 0-0. And the final game down in South Wales sees another very under pressure manager visit the Swansea.com stadium. It is Swansea City versus Norwich City. For Swansea, no win in their last 3. Leicester and Southampton, 2 of the relegated sides, but they'll be very disappointed with the result against QPR. Going 1-0 down, then going down to 10. Just gave them next to no chance, really. And while they were fairly competitive after that point in the game, it was always going to put them on the back foot. And the one issue with Swansea this year is going to be dominating games, having a regular goal threat. They're doing an okay job, but they're steady if unspectacular. And they don't really have the squad to go any further than they are at the minute. So Alan Sheehan under a little bit of pressure for the first time, but no pressure compares to Liam Manning at the moment. 4 defeats in a row for Norwich City. Another one by 1-0 in midweek at Derby. 3 of the last 4 without scoring. And you know what? They actually probably had the better of a lot of the Derby game. They had more shots on goal, but a lot of them, again, half chances, opportunities from distance, 13 corner set piece efforts. They weren't hitting the target. Derby probably still had some of the best chances of the match, and they're not really creating for someone like Josh Sargent. The midfield players are really struggling to combine. And I know it is a new look midfield, and we said we didn't think Norwich City quite had the squad for it. It's starting to prove that way. I think Liam Manning may well be gone after this weekend, if I'm being honest, if they lose again. But hopefully, obviously, for his sake, they can pick up a result and they can start to find their direction again. But into the bottom 3 for the first time since they've been relegated, and 4 defeats in a row is not a good look. The one big question here is who's going to score the goals, because Swansea have drawn 3 blanks in their last 6. Norwich have drawn 3 blanks in their last 4. Look, Swansea have had the odd little tight win this year. I'm going to go for them to do it here. Heap the pressure on Liam Manning with a 1-0 win at home to Norwich. So with that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. Yes, 6 draws out of the 12 matches, despite the fact there was not a single one in the midweek fixture list. 4 Championship favourite scorelines. Coventry City to score 3 at home and stay top of the league, and Borough behind them to keep pace with a 2-1 win at home to Wrexham, and Sheffield Wednesday at the bottom to pick up another point. Those are just my predictions for match week 12. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Give us your predictions for this weekend's action, and if you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out when we return next Wednesday to look ahead to match week 13. A quick plug before we finish off here today as well. The FM26 beta is out tonight. We will be streaming and releasing videos every single day over on my FM channels. So come and follow us at Load FM if you haven't already. And come and get involved in the football chat over on Twitch. It's good fun and it's light-hearted too. If you enjoyed this one, as always, please do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe, turn that notification bell on. You get regular episodes here, and I would imagine a few manager specials in the next few weeks. We're getting towards that season, but will the pressure pile on for some this weekend? We'll be back after match week 12 to find out the answer next week.